The first thing every child in Air had to learn was how to tie a proper stone knot. You looped the rope twice around the weight, pulled it tight with your foot braced against the quarry block, then cinched the loose end around your waist so the stone dragged at your heels like a sullen pet. Rich children practiced on polished marble slabs the size of steamer trunks. Poor children like Leora practiced on apple-sized pebbles at first, but the knots were the same, and every knot carried the lesson carved above the city gates. Gravity is the great equalizer. Except everyone knew it wasn't. Gravity taxes were supposed to keep the proud mountain settlement humble. Stones proportional to wealth, fines for any citizen caught unburdened in public. In theory, the law kept moneyed families from strutting too high. In practice, the wealthy hired porters and shifting boys to haul their taxes for them. They glided featherlight through market arches while teams of wiry adolescents bore the freight in silent, sweating columns behind them. The poor, who couldn't outsource mass, lugged their own share. Small stones, yes, but stones they had to keep on their person from dawn to dusk, clacking against ankle bones, chafing hips raw, grinding posture into a permanent stoop. Leora's family owned 3 stones, one for her mother's weaving stall, one for her father's half-share in a roof-patching guild, and a third so small it was almost ceremonial. Her own tax, awarded when she turned 12 and joined the workforce as a cliff moss picker. Each morning she scrambled up the inner faces of Mount Lark, cutting green fuzz prized for dyes. The family's 3 stones dangling from a belt that never stopped tugging her earthward. On good days she climbed until her lungs burned and her stone cords frayed, then descended to sell the moss in the Sundial Plaza, where silver-cuffed aristocrats strolled unencumbered, all their stones piled on padded wagons. One late midsummer, a windstorm tore through the slopes, sucking loose slabs off the cliff face. Moss harvesters huddled in crevices until the gale passed. When Leora finally peeked out, she saw a fresh mouth torn in the limestone, its throat plunging black into the mountain's heart. Curiosity itched worse than the grit under her nails. The overseer's whistle shrilled for return lines, but Leora unhooked her harness and crawled inside. The tunnel slanted sharply downward. Drifts of stone dust deadened sound. Her own breathing filled her ears like sea surf. After 20 paces, the shaft widened into a vaulted chamber, iridescent with mineral bloom. Yet what stopped her heart was not the beauty but the hush. Not merely the absence of echo, but the absence of weight. The trio of tax stones that had dragged at her belt since dawn floated outward, tethered only by their ropes, bobbing like tethered balloons. Leora blinked twice, thinking dizziness fooled her balance. She drew herself into a cautious crouch and released the knot at her waist. The stones drifted free, turning lazy pirouettes in the center of the chamber. She reached to snatch one, expecting it to plummet, but it wobbled away from her fingertips with the sluggish reluctance of a soap bubble. Zero gravity. Legends whispered of hollow pockets in deep rock where the old gods stored sky, but most folk classified such tales with phoenix feathers and perpetual motion pump. Leora pressed a palm against the curved wall. The limestone thrummed faintly, as if the entire chamber rang with a silent chord. Maybe air currents or magnetic tricks held matter suspended. She didn't understand. She didn't need to. All she knew was that here inside the mountain, the stones lost their power. Here, the tax was nothing but a fist-sized reminder. A shrill echo from the shaft made her flinch, the overseer calling roll. Leora hurriedly retied her belt outside the chamber's mouth, feeling the stones reassert their heaviness the instant she stepped back into normal gravity. She climbed down to the mustering ledge, said nothing, and spent the night rolling in feverish half-sleep, mind orbiting the impossible hollow like a moon. For 3 weeks she returned in secret. Each visit she lowered a longer rope through the chamber's throat, probing for further pockets. She found another cavern, then a third, each vaster than the last, all luminous with fungi that cast pale violet glows. Sometimes she lay belly down on a floating slab and shoved herself off gently, drifting amid glittering dust motes, laughing until she cried. In those weightless hours she felt no tax, no class, no Chancellor Tarvix with his law books and his gilded scowl. Only her heartbeat, light as a lark. The fourth cavern changed everything. Her rope hissed through space for so long she feared it would never touch bottom. When it finally snagged, she shimmied along and found not stone but salvage. Wooden crates, iron cauldrons, marble plinths abandoned, still wrapped in civic inventory seals. A memory surfaced. Last winter, heavy wagons heaped with confiscated contraband had rolled up the mountain road, each item labeled "Wealth seized for non-payment of gravity tax." Officials had announced the goods would be stored in municipal vaults. Leora now saw the truth. The vaults were these zero-gravity caverns, the perfect place to stash weight without paying the price of weight. Someone in power understood the mountain's secret, and they'd exploited it for years. Leora ran fingers over an ivory chessboard stamped with the crest of House Salor, once the richest clan in Air before they defaulted. Everyone believed Salor's patriarch had died destitute, yet here sat his treasures, floating in clandestine luxury while his descendants trudged around town with shale chips on a rope. She felt heat flood her limbs, hotter than anger, sharper than hunger. Resolve. This was no private wonderland to crack. Gravity's lie had to crack in open air. The next dawn, Leora visited her childhood friend Garen, now a junior scribe in the census hall, trusted by no one important enough to notice missing parchments. Over steaming cups of barley coffee she told him everything. Garen's hands shook. Ink speckled the tabletop. "If you invent this, the lictors will brand you a heretic. Come see first," she said. He did. The moment the stones hanging from his own belt floated free, the scribe's skepticism burst like a beeswax seal over a candle. "Star, save us," Garen whispered, tears silvering his lashes. "We've been carrying chains that never needed to exist." They devised a plan. Garen would circulate anonymous broadsheets declaring a pilgrimage. Citizens disillusioned by inequity could meet at dawn on the 33rd day of late heat, bringing their tax stones. Leora would guide them through quarry trails to the zero-gravity caverns, where they could relinquish their burdens for good. Wrist twanged at every step. Lictors patrolled taverns for seditious talk, and Chancellor Tarvik's informants sniffed rumors like hunting dogs. Yet the mood in Air had curdled for years. By the time Garen's fourth flyer landed under a rain barrel, discontent was ready tinder. The parchment bore only 3 words, scrawled in charcoal: "Let go. Ascend." The dawn of late heat 33 arrived, bruised with thunderclouds. Leora's heart hammered as she crept to the appointed cliff shelf. She'd prayed for a dozen followers. She found hundreds. Dockworkers, seamstresses, junior architects, even 2 merchants she recognized from upper lanes. They came hunched under stone loads large enough to make them stagger, but too small to justify hired bearers. The middling class, crushed between extremes. Garen counted nearly 600 souls before giving up. He hoisted a lantern. "No speeches," he murmured to Leora. "Words are paper. Gravity is truth." They marched single file along goat tracks. Rain turned paths slick, yet spirits lifted with each step, as if anticipation itself reduced weight. At the tunnel mouth, Leora raised a warning palm. "Past here, stay roped. Some passages are disorienting." One by one, citizens ducked inside. Gasps burst like popcorn when the first ranks reached the initial pocket, and their stones floated free. Leora directed them onward to the grand cavern she'd christened the Atrium, large enough to host an army. Lantern light gleamed off drifting granite blocks and confiscated gilded wardrobes, the forbidden spoils of inequality now bobbing within reach of calloused fingers. Spontaneous laughter, then singing. People untied rock after rock, threading them onto stalactites like ornaments. Some danced, spinning mid-air. Others lay back in weightless rest, tears beating at their lashes only to glide upward and burst in sparkling droplets. Leora expected catharsis. She did not expect fury. Yet as relief ebbed, anger surged to fill its wake. Bakers spat curses at the memory of loaves ruined because their shoulders ached too badly to knead. A nurse shouted that she'd lost a patient after stumbling with her duty stone and dropping precious medicine. Stories sprayed like shrapnel, and hovering all around them were the confiscated riches of families ruined by tax arrears, a crime no harsher than inability to haul enough mass. "We go back," declared a voice that quavered, but did not break. It belonged to old Mother Delph, who sold honey sticks in the plaza, her spine bent like a question mark from decades of drag. Now, drifting upright for the first time in 50 years, she radiated a terrible grace. "We go back lighter and let the city see." She lifted her rope empty and hurled it toward the cavern's ceiling. A cheer roared. Word spread quicker than bats. By the time Tarvix finished his noon audience with foreign envoys, stoneless citizens were already re-entering air. They walked tall, untethered cords swinging like flails. Crowds gathered to gawk. When lictors demanded proof of tax compliance, giddy rebels pointed up the mountain and said, "Take it with the sky if you like." Tarvix's first response was predictable. Emergency edict. Anyone found without stones would be arrested. Any talk of zero-gravity caverns deemed sedition, but containment failed within hours. Porters hired by the elite slipped away, stones falling from their grips as they joined the march back to the mountain. Artisans tossed quarry chunks off balconies in public jubilation. Even junior lictors, rankled by unfair promotion tolls, began unstrapping their basalt badges. That night, flames licked the skyline, bonfires of discarded ropes, yet not a single shop was looted, no estate ransacked. People didn't crave riches, they craved weightlessness. The only violence was the crash of stones smashing into streets. Symbolic meteors heralding a new cosmos. Tarvix barricaded himself in the Hall of Governance, summoning the Council of Heavy's wealthy patriarchs whose stones weighed more than oxen. Ironically, most were stranded. Their hired carriers had joined the rebellion, leaving them unable to drag tuckas across town to attend the crisis meeting. Those who arrived sweated beneath boulders strapped to sleds, their dignity melting into panic. Leora and Garen found themselves propelled to the revolt's forefront, though neither had ever led more than a crew of moss pickers or scribes. Delegates thronged their boarding house, begging direction. They drafted a simple demand: abolish gravity taxes, vacate fines, and open the caverns as communal halls, so no secret government could ever weaponize weight again. The council refused. Tarvix countered with compromise: have the stones, keep the law. When messengers relayed the offer, laughter followed them all the way back up marble steps. 3 days of stalemate passed. Bread lines lengthened. Rumors spread that Tarvix contacted the neighboring Principality of Varric for military aid. Leora met with Garen atop the half-finished sky bridge, where abandoned cranes swayed in warm wind. Both looked hollow-eyed but resolute. "He won't yield until he's forced to," Garen said. "We have numbers, but he has crossbow turrets and outer walls." "Walls crumble," Leora answered, gaze fixed on the dark silhouette of Mount Lark. "Gravity can be our weapon too, if we choose where to restore it." Garen followed her stare and whistled soft. "Drop the confiscated stones." "Not just stones," she said. "Tarvix's own hoard. His signet plinths, brass statues, everything hidden down there. We guide it out of weightlessness right above the hall's plaza. No one gets harmed. We warn them to clear the square. But when that mass slams earthward, the sound alone will shake their teeth loose. It could destroy half the administrative quarter, then they'll learn what it feels like to haul rubble." Preparations unfurled in nervous whispers. Volunteers, many former quarrymen with intimate knowledge of rigs, returned to the atrium. Using block and tackle contraptions cannibalized from cliff platforms, they lashed Tarvix's confiscated trove into a single asteroid of gold leaf, marble, and polished granite. As they ran the top of the asteroid, though the costs are difficult, they picked up Tinet, the granite, disembarked, then polished the gravel and concrete on Ian's dark, precipitous mass floated benign as a whale carcass in midair until someone tugged the rope lead out through the tunnel incline, past the threshold where gravity asserted dominion again. At dawn on the 7th day, church bells clanged, a pattern never rung except to warn of avalanche. Citizens evacuated the governance district, leaving streets eerily vacant. High in the palace, Tarvix interpreted the bells as riot sirens and smiled thinly. He still believed walls and laws had gravity of their own. Leora held the master line beside Garen on a ridge above the plaza. Together they eased the rope through a wooden break until the horde reached the incline's lip. They inhaled, glanced at each other, and let go. Silence first, Then a sound like the sky cracking. 400 tons of ill-gotten grandeur slammed into marble tiles, pulverizing fountains, sending tremors rippling through bureaucratic catacombs. No one died. The crowd was 2 streets away, but Tarvix pitched from his balcony as the shockwave toppled pillars. Leora never discovered whether he fell to his death or merely fell from power. Either way, the city saw him plunge, stoneless, into the dust his laws had created. The aftermath was messy, but momentum belonged to the unburdened. A provisional council assembled in the Singers' Amphitheater, chosen by lottery to avoid replacing one elite with another. The first act: repeal the gravity tax, render all stones ornamental. The second: convert the zero-gravity caverns into public common schools of aerial dance, laboratories for weightless craft, archives floated on silver tethers. Future wealth would no longer be measured in mass but in contribution. Audits counted hours volunteered toward communal projects. A jest at first, yet oddly satisfying. The lighter you lived, the richer you became. Weeks later, when scaffolds still framed broken colonnades and seeds of wildflowers rooted in smashed courtyards, Leora accompanied Garen to the atrium. Children chased fireflies through violet fungal glow, parents reclining on cushions that drifted like lily pads. In one corner, engineers experimented with spiral pumps that could lift water using only the push of a fingertip. Music shimmered everywhere, notes lingering in slow pirouettes after every pluck of a string. Garen twirled a quill absent-mindedly. History will need a name for what happened, he mused. The Stone Drop Revolt? The Upward Exodus? Leora shook her head, watching a toddler somersault mid-air with shrieking delight. Names weigh things down. Let's leave it weightless, he smiled. As you wish. She pushed off a boulder and floated away, hair fanning like comet trails. For the first time since childhood, she felt no rope at her waist, no tug on her spine, only the hush of air and the hum of living rock. The mountain's heart had given them a secret, and they had refused to keep it secret any longer. Gravity still ruled earth and blood and bone, but not mind, not will. And in the ember glow of the caverns, humanity discovered that the surest way to stand tall was to learn together how to let go.